Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So we have seen in the previous segment about the slow processing speed. This affects the skills of the child. Let's take the students through what are the skill levels that is getting affected because of the slow processing speed.
Yes. There are various important skills that we need to have for them to perform well in academics. Let us look into the skill levels. The first one is reading. The next one that could get affected is spelling. Writing could get affected. They are listening. Listening is extremely important. Most of the concepts we explain to children, that means unless they have proper listening, they may not be able to understand. So listening may get affected. Their memory, especially the active working memory part of it, may get affected in spite of having high intelligence. They may not be able to plan well. They may not be able to learn everything because the way they learn is a little different. Let us remember, if they don't learn the way we teach them, we need to teach them the way they learn. Their speed of doing things could be a little slow because of processing speed being a little slow. Directionality. When I talk of directionality, I am talking of right and left. All of us have confusion in right and left, but we have a strategy to overcome the confusion. But these are children who are not able to come up with their own strategies to differentiate or remember which is right and which is left. In our academics, there are a lot of things that we tie to right and left. For example, when we teach them map, we say to the right is Bay of Bengal and to the left is Arabian Sea. And in math, we have integers where we say the numbers on the right of 0 will have more value than to the numbers on to the left of 0. But which is left and which is right, these children get confused and they could make lots of mistakes. Yes, the difficulties in skill level does not really stop with skill level difficulties but could also go into behavior problems.
So, there are other conditions as well that coexist with this deficits of skills and the slow processing speed. So, some of the three main areas which are comorbidity factors which can coexist with dyslexia is attention problems, the fine motor coordination, and of course the executive functions. Now, executive functions Harini has dealt with in quite detail previously. Attention. Now, when we talk about attention, we talk about two different kinds of attention. There is this child who is hyperactive. Now, hyperactive or ADHD is a child who cannot sit in a place for a minute. It's the child who is fidgety and who's always either dropping his things in the classroom or even to the extent of getting up in the classroom and walking around it because he can't sit in a place. A hyperactive child will have to be made to sit in a place, have his focused attention onto the task at hand. It's difficult but doable with occupational therapy. The other attention deficit child is the hypo child. Now, a hypo child is the child who is the perfect candidate of student to be in the classroom because he creates no issues for the teachers. He sits quietly at the back of the classroom, but he is lost in his own world. He has not even been in the classroom mentally, though physically he may be sitting in a place. But mentally he is away in his own dream world. Again, there is no attention to the task at hand. Both these issues, hyper and hypo, are deficits which can be treated using the occupational therapy sessions to help them to overcome this and pay attention. Fine motor coordination is something that we again have talked about earlier on, where we talk about the visual motor integration or the fine motor coordination, which need not be just visual inputs but even auditory inputs as well. For instance, when you give dictation in a classroom, the teacher is giving the dictation, the child has to hear the dictation, process what he has heard, and he has to write it down. Fine motor coordination is the act of writing using a tool, a pencil or a pen. So these are the comorbid conditions. Now, one has to see when you are trying to say and screen to see if this child is dyslexia or not, is which is the primary difficulty for the child. Is it the deficits in the skill levels, or is it his hyperactivity, or his hypoactivity, or his motor coordination? That would be the secondary. Sometimes we have this hyperactivity or hypoactivity being the primary area of concern, where dyslexia will fall into the secondary area. We can call a child dyslexic or even at risk for dyslexia only if the learning difficulty or the skill deficits is in the primary area of concern. Then, of course, with occupational therapy being given to the child for the hyper or hypo or even for the fine motor coordination, then this will help the child to overcome his comorbid factors and help him to help remediate in the skill areas as well. We have seen how there is dyslexia and the comorbid factors that affect the performance of the child in classroom with the skill area deficits. So, are these the only things that we see in a child with difficulties?
See, what happens is when a child is going through a lot of difficulty in school because of this condition called dyslexia, he is not able to perform well. Once he does not perform well, most often we don't ask the question why, but we just say that he does not perform well. And we also pass a lot of comments. The type of comments that we could pass are, if only he would try harder. And then the children are made to move from one tuition class to another. And the typical day of a child could start at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6:15 in the morning. He does his school homework, goes to school, comes back, and he is pushed to tuition 1, to tuition 2, to tuition 3, and then he comes back after a really tired day, and then the parents
say that he is
lazy, or he refuses to get motivated.
Yeah.
And then they start giving them advice. But when the child actually is not able to perform, there will be a silent cry or a silent whisper, I am not able to do, please understand me. But unfortunately, nobody takes a minute or so to listen to the silent or a very soft whisper that is there inside a child's mind. And we go about advising. There is a possibility that we go about advising the child, saying that you are learning for your own good. Why don't you do well? Why don't you write properly? See how many ever times I've asked you to learn, but still you're not learning properly. You're not able to score mark. At that point of time, the child might become rebellious because he puts in a lot of effort. But the effort is not where the issue is. The issue is more with he's not been taught the way or the type of effort that he's got to put in, and hence it does not get converted into performance, and he gets so frustrated. So what happens?
So many times we have seen children coming in and saying, I don't want to do it. I don't like this. I don't want to study.
Yes, they become very, very rebellious.
So would you agree with me, Harini, when we say that this rebellious nature is more of a defense mechanism for the child to shield himself because he knows he's unable to do, and yet he's expected to do something which he can't do?
Yes, it's a defense mechanism one, and there's a lot of frustration that builds up in a child because he's trying his best. Nobody understands, and when someone does not understand us, it is bound to happen. Or you could see another type of behavior. Everyone else is finished, but I'm not finished yet. If I say something, I will look stupid. And so they start bottling their feelings and
Yes.
emotions inside, which is really not good. One fine day, the bottle will just burst open,
True.
leading to a lot of behavioral issues.
Yes. So it's something like there is a saying that when you judge a fish by its ability to climb trees, the fish is going to live its life thinking it's stupid.
Exactly.
So, child who cannot do because of there is an innate difficulty in the child, but is being forced to perform as per the standards set by others, then the child is definitely going to go down in his own self-esteem and self-confidence.
Yes, once we don't understand that and we start judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree, then it'll lead to a lot of behavioral issues. It'll lead to problems like the child being very bossy or angry. Why anger? All of us feel angry when we feel a little inadequate. When the child feels inadequate in class and when he is not able to perform like others, the child gets very angry. He gives up easily. Yes, he tries. He is not confident and hence he gives up easily. He starts writing and then the teacher or the parent says, write properly. He is not too sure whether he would be able to complete and hence he gives up easily. Depressed. Yes.
That's automatically the next step that happens to the child. Depression, right?
Yes.
He gets into it so quickly.
Yes, and he starts isolating himself. He does not mingle well. He becomes a loner and he becomes completely depressed, aggressive, or they could also overreact. Sometimes, even without saying anything, they could just start crying or they could start shouting. Negative, oppositional, frustrated, or all the other behavior problems. But the one that we really need to look out for is school refusal.
Yes.
Here is a child who's very intelligent. Please remember, dyslexic children have high IQ. Their average IQ, their IQ starts at 90%, it will only go up. So, assuming that there is a child with an IQ of 110 or 120 percentage, but with that condition called dyslexia, and he is not understood, he is not identified, he is not helped, and hence he refuses to go to school, he sits at home. Anybody with high IQ, Vilasini, we know very well that they need to be given a lot of work for the mind. But here, there is absolutely nothing that happens. He might get into unwanted company. Maybe there'll be someone who will ask him to do something which is not the dumb thing. Let us just, for example, take hacking. Some of our children are very, very good with computers. They might not be able to write a computer language, but they might be able to operate it beautifully well. So they get into hacking, and if others encourage them to hack, I'm talking about unethical hacking, there is a possibility that he might do it extremely well. And the others who pushed him into this might start appreciating him. The appreciation which he has never received so far in his life.
Yes.
He gets it and he gets hooked onto that line completely. He goes a little haywire, he loses track, he gets derailed. Is it right?
Another factor for school refusal, which I have seen happening in schools around here, is the fact that there's a lot of peer pressure for the child. And when the child is facing such peer pressure, he is unable to even cope with the kind of demands that are expected out of him. So there is the peer pressure from the peers, there is pressure from the teachers to perform. You get back home and there's pressure from the parents, who the first thing they do when a child comes back is to take his bag and see, okay, have you done your test today? What marks did you get? Yes. Right? So this kind of pressure ultimately leads to this fact where the child is saying, I don't want to go to school. Yes. It's not a happy place for the child.
Yes.
And that is something that we need to be looking out for.
Yes.
To help the child.
Yes. Every child is a star. Just that some of them learn a little differently, but they have a lot of potential. Unfortunately, we do not take time to look at the potential that they have. Let's, for example, take a child who's very good at sports or very good at drawing. The minute the child does not perform well in school, and if that is conveyed to the parents, the first thing that they do is they stop the co-curricular activity that the child was going to, and hence the child loses that feel-good factor. let us remember every child has a potential, every child has a star, and it's not dyslexia as a condition that comes in the way of a success or growth, but it is the non-understanding of this condition or unidentifying this condition called dyslexia and non-acceptance and refusal to give help to this child that is an impediment for the success and growth of this child.
So this child can be successful. We have so many success stories, right?
Yes,
Can
lots and lots of people have been very, very successful in life in spite of this condition called dyslexia. Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple, Graham Bell, the first person to invent the telephone, Henry Ford, you have Muhammad Ali, you have Einstein, Edison, Steven Spielberg, the list goes on. These are people who are amazing, who've invented a lot of new things. But unfortunately for them, they found their strength.
Exactly.
We have so many children in our school with the same type of potential, but where they are not able to identify the strength and the potential,
Yes.
and the society maybe will lose them completely.
Absolutely.
So dyslexia is definitely not an impediment to growth or success. All that they need is a little bit of helping first by way of identifying and second by way of remedial teaching. Vilasni, could you please say what is meant by remedial teaching?
Teaching is basically an intervention to help the child acquire the skills that he doesn't have. Basically, we're looking at the academic areas. So, a remedial teaching is first of all based on the multisensory approach, where we just don't do talk and chalk as is being done in regular schools, but we have other modalities like visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile. Now, all these modes, when we do in the multisensory way, the child is given, and as you have mentioned earlier, you teaching the child in the way he learns, not just in the way we know how to teach. So, it is a very systematic approach. We start from the very beginning, right? And we base it on the strengths of the child. And we use that strength to help him overcome his needs. So, identifying the strengths and needs of the child and building on them is so very important. And if we do it early enough, then the child is set on the path of learning and he is able to cope up with the higher classes as he goes up. Remedial teaching is very individualized. There is no such concept of one glove fits all, right? So every child is treated as an individual. The program or the individualized educational plan, as we call it, the IEPs, are made for each child as a unique identity. It is definitely using the multiple intelligence theory, which has been propagated by Howard Gardner, and the learning styles of the child. We will be dealing in detail with multiple intelligence later on in this segments that we are coming up with. But basically, it's not about, would you like to say it, Harini?
Yes, it's not about how smart they are, it's about how they are smart.
Excellent. So we also use the phonetic angle. So we teach them with the sounds so that the child is not made to learn something by rote, but he analyzes and he learns by understanding. So that once you give it to him with the basic foundation, he can build on these ways for his classes even in the later stage in his college life or even in his working.
So, has the government recognized this difficulty? Has the government done something, especially for the exam going children?
Yes, we have examination concessions that have been given to the child who has been diagnosed, if I can use that word, as dyslexia or dyslexic. So, but each board of education differs in the kind of concessions they offer. Basically, all the boards offer extra time, dropping of second language, and of course, many of the boards also allow the child to use a scribe. If the child has got difficulty with the writing aspect, where it's a condition that we have to see later on whether it is a fine motor condition or a gross motor condition, right? Then, of course, marking for content and overlooking spelling errors. Again, spelling errors, they lose out a lot of marks. So, if the content is there, why do we cut marks for spelling errors? And then, of course, some boards allow the use of calculator. Again, it differs from board to board, but the one good thing that has come out is that everybody recognizes the need for the child to receive concession if he has difficulties, because we test the knowledge of the child by his writing. We don't test the knowledge of the child as what he has. So he has to express it in writing, he has to express it in writing exams. But if we can give them these extra concessions, the child is able to show us that yes, I know and I can learn.
Yes.
So apart from the academic interventions that we are giving the child, whether it's remedial teaching, there are certain other therapies and other specialists who we can refer this child to get extra help in areas that is not directly impacted by the remedial teaching that we do. So can you take us through the various referrals that we can give the child?
Yes. So the first one that I would definitely talk about is occupational therapy. When we talked about, we were talking of fine motor coordination problem, we talked about attention problem, and there are other types of difficulties and problems that you will see in academic areas, but that can be remediated not just by giving remedial teaching,
Yes.
but added on to that, they might need something called as an occupational therapy. Teachers, please remember, we are talking of occupational therapy and we are not talking of physiotherapy. These two are different things. Occupational therapy deals more with the sensory integration issues and other related issues. The next therapy that they might require is speech. Speech is extremely important. To have clarity in speech is very, very important, because once a child does not have clarity in speech, he may not be able to read properly, meaning the pronunciation may not be all right. That means he might remember the word in a different way, he might retrieve it the same way, he might not spell it properly, and hence his final answer may not be right. Hence, they need to have clarity in speech. Over here, there is one thing that we need to remember. There are things that as teachers we may be able to do directly, like the remedial teaching. But the teaching, when we talk of giving help to a child, there are two components to it. One is your remedial teaching, another one, as important as remedial teaching, is to refer them to the right referral. So we just saw the first two things that are extremely important, but it just doesn't stop with that, because sometimes they could need counseling and behavior modification, especially when children's the primary learning difficulty has gone into the next stage where even the behavior is affected.
Exactly. So the dyslexic child would have difficulties not only in the skill areas, but in his social interactions as well as his emotional
Yes.
aspect.
Yes.
So yes, it's so important to send them to the right person for the right difficulty. So ultimately, I think it's with the teachers. Now their motto should be to identify these children, but it is not meant to brand them. We are not here to label them. We are here to find their strengths and needs, and we are here to find their potential and help the child to bring out that potential. We need to allow them to bloom and watch them become beautiful flowers. We need to give them this hand holding, the remediation, and the earlier we do it, that is will be the best time to start. Start as early as we can, and then watch them overcome their problems and start to cope with their difficulties and perform in the classroom.
Any child who does not do well. So when I talk of not doing well, I'm talking about the written answer that a child has. So let us just take a few steps back to see what happens. A child having difficulties in reading a child having difficulties in retention, a child having difficulties in retrieval, a child having difficulties in spelling, and then to convert it into writing will definitely not be able to perform well. Indirectly, it's a chain. There are links. So the first one is your reading, next one is your retention, third is your retrieval, followed by spelling, and then making it into meaningful sentences. And all this is your mind thing, and the mind and the hand should go at the same speed, so that whatever the mind says, the hand is able to sort of write the same. If we come across a child who's not able to give that sort of written output that we expect, please look into to see which one of the link is missing. Most often you will definitely be able to pinpoint and say, hey, it is either the reading or the writing or learning, or it's a combination of one or more of these. So let us understand where the difficulty is. Let us embrace them. Let us empower them, and let's elevate them to great heights. So today in this module, we saw what is dyslexia. I was talking about empowering them. In our modules that will follow, we will share with you the ways to empower these children.
Yes, Harini, we've given them the insight into the dyslexic child's world. Let's remove this cloud in the parent's mind that dyslexia is a curse on the child. It is not. Each child is unique. We have to help the parents to accept their child for what the child is. And we have to clear this, or should I say demystify dyslexia in the minds of the parents and give them the help that is required. We need to handhold these children and raise them to reaching their potential. Let's see in the following segments, we are going to be giving you strategies and tools to do the perfect remediation for the child within the classroom. Because it's you teachers who can make or break the child. And it's you who can elevate this child, as Harini said. Please embrace them and empower them. It's in your hands. Let's work together and hold hands and work towards making this a dyslexia-sensitive society.